You were ready. You had prepared. You had gone over what you were going to say, rehearsed it in your head. Once, twice, maybe 3 times you knew the subject. And still, the moment came when the words needed to leave your mouth. Something inside you locked up. It wasn't a lack of knowledge. It wasn't lack of preparation. It was a voice that shows up a fraction of a second before you open your mouth. And it says, what if you're wrong? What if everyone realizes you don't actually know as much as you seem to? What if you speak and nobody takes you seriously? You know that voice. You've heard it before, maybe in a meeting at work, when you had an idea and decided not to share it. Maybe when you were about to send a message to someone you admire and spent 40 minutes rewriting it until you finally decided not to send it at all. Maybe when you looked in the mirror before leaving the house, adjusting your clothes, your hair, your expression, trying to look more confident than you actually felt. That voice has a name. And in this video, you're going to discover what that name is. Because the shadow has a name, and when something has a name, it starts to lose its power. But before we get there, I need you to stay with me for a moment. Not the way people usually watch videos. Half here, half doing something else. I mean really stay, because what I'm about to show you isn't a list of motivational tips. It's not believe in yourself written in a nice-looking font. It goes deeper than that. This is a map of the inner territory where self-doubt grows, and more importantly, a real path out of it. In the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you the story of someone who lived inside that doubt for years. I'll show you the warning signs most people ignore until it's far too late. I'll name the shadow that quietly runs underneath all of it. And I'll give you a 30-day training, week by week, a way to start rebuilding the confidence that was always yours, but got buried under years of voices that were never really yours to begin with. So stay with me. This video might become a turning point for you. But first, there's something important you need to understand. Doubting yourself is not a character flaw. It's not a lack of faith. It's not laziness. It's a learned response, a pattern that was installed in you, most likely when you were still a child, at a time when you didn't have the tools to protect yourself from it. And like any learned pattern, it can be unlearned. It can be rewritten. It can change. You're not broken. You're functioning exactly the way you were conditioned to function. And strange as it may sound, that's actually very good news. Because what was learned can be unlearned. What was built can be rebuilt. What was buried can be brought back into the light. The journey starts now, and it begins with a story. Before we get into the story, I want us to slow down for a moment. We live in a world that rewards speed, fast content, fast answers, fast solutions. And a part of you probably came here expecting a simple 3-step formula that fixes everything in 5 minutes. I understand that impulse, but I'm going to be honest with you. What we're about to explore here asks for a different kind of attention, the kind of attention you give to something that actually matters, the kind you give when a real friend is opening up and telling you something important. Because what I want to show you isn't surface level. It goes into the deeper structure of how you relate to yourself. It's about the stories you carry about who you are, what you deserve, what you're capable of. And most of those stories were written a long time ago, by hands that weren't yours. So take a breath. Let the outside world wait for a moment. What comes next deserves your presence. Chronic self-doubt doesn't start today. It has roots. It has a history. And if you want to change the present, you have to understand where it came from. Not to relive old pain, not to blame anyone, but to finally see the pattern clearly. Because the moment you can see the pattern, it stops running your life from the shadows. So, let's step into this story. A story about someone named Emma, but if you listen closely, you might recognize parts of yourself in it too. Emma wakes up at 6:47 in the morning. Her alarm went off at 6:30, but she stayed in bed for 17 minutes with her phone inches from her face, scrolling through a social feed she doesn't even like anymore. It's not laziness, it's delay. But delaying what exactly? She couldn't really tell you. All she knows is that getting up feels harder than it should. Emma is 32. She works as a systems analyst at a tech company. She's good at what she does. Her co-workers know it. Her boss knows it. Everyone knows it, except Emma. She gets up, walks to the bathroom, looks at the mirror for about 3 seconds, then looks away. It's not a conscious thing. She doesn't think, I don't want to see myself. She just can't hold her own gaze for very long. She puts toothpaste on her brush while checking her work email on her phone. 3 new messages, one from the main client. Emma, I'll need you to present the project analysis in today's meeting at 2 p.m. She reads it twice. Her stomach tightens. The meeting, the one she already knew was coming. The one she spent the last 3 days preparing for. 3 days building an analysis that is, objectively, very good. She knows it's good, but her stomach doesn't know that. Her stomach only knows that at 2 p.m. she'll be in a room with 8 people looking at her, and that's enough to make breakfast lose its taste. Emma drinks her coffee standing in the kitchen, looking out the window at the backyard. It's cloudy, the neighbor is sweeping his sidewalk. Life out there looks calm. Life in here feels like a race where she's never quite sure if she's running in the right direction. On the bus to work, packed shoulder to shoulder, Emma opens the PowerPoint for her presentation for the 5th time. She changes one word on the second slide, changes it back, adjusts the color of a chart, reverts it, closes the file, opens it again. The analysis is good. She knows it's good. But what if she missed something? What if the client asks a question she can't answer? What if everyone realizes she's less competent than she seems? That last question is the interesting one. What if everyone realizes she's less competent than she seems? Look closely at the structure of that sentence. It assumes right from the start that there is a real version of Emma, one that is less capable than the version people see. It assumes other people are wrong to trust her. It assumes the negative view is the most accurate one. That's the logic of self-doubt. It doesn't need evidence to exist. It simply rewrites the evidence that's already there. Emma gets to the office at 8:52. Her co-worker Raphael is at the coffee machine, full of energy. Hey, Emma, ready for your presentation today? Emma smiles. I think so. Raphael laughs. What do you mean, think? You spent 3 days on that thing. You're going to crush it. Emma laughs with him. On the outside. On the inside, the voice says, he has no idea. The morning moves slowly. Emma answers emails, joins a routine call, reviews some code. All of it happens on autopilot, because the active part of Emma's mind is busy somewhere else, running simulations of the 2 p.m. meeting. Imagining difficult questions, imagining people's faces when she freezes, imagining the exact moment the client realizes she's not as capable as her resume suggests. 12:30. Emma can't really eat lunch. She eats half of her meal at her desk. Raphael walks by. Going to lunch. Emma points at the container. Already eating. He makes a face, like he disapproves but doesn't push it. 1:15. Emma goes to the restroom. Looks at the mirror again, this time for longer. What does she see? Someone who looks tired, someone who prepared a solid analysis, but has one strand of hair out of place, and somehow that feels like a bad omen. She fixes her hair, takes a breath, quietly tells the reflection, you can do this. The voice inside her laughs. 1:55, conference room. Emma arrives 5 minutes early. She opens her laptop, connects the projector cable. The first slide appears on the screen. Project name, her name, today's date. It looks solid. One by one, the 8 people walk in. The client arrives last. Handshake. Emma, looking forward to seeing your analysis. Emma smiles. Thanks. Happy to walk you through it. 2:02. Emma starts speaking, and something happens that she didn't expect. She starts talking, and the words come. Not perfectly, not without 1 or 2 moments where she pauses a half-second longer than she'd like, but the words come. The analysis makes sense. The data supports the conclusions. The client nods along while she speaks. One manager writes something in a notebook. Another asks a question. Emma answers, and the answer is right. 2:47. The meeting ends. The client shakes Emma's hand again. Excellent work, very solid. Emma thanks him. Raphael, who was in the meeting, turns to her in the hallway. Told you you'd crush it. Emma smiles. Yeah, it worked out. Walking back to her desk, Emma feels something strange. It's not excitement. It's closer to relief, to exhaustion. Like someone who just survived something that was never supposed to be a survival situation. And that's exactly the problem. Emma delivered an excellent presentation. She was prepared. Everyone received it well, and still, the entire process was filled with 3 days of growing anxiety, a morning of paralysis disguised as productivity, and 47 minutes of catastrophic simulations inside a corporate bathroom. The result was good, but the internal cost was way too high. And it keeps happening. Not just with presentations, with the email that takes 3 hours to send because Emma rewrites it 4 times to make sure she doesn't sound stupid. With the idea she has in a team meeting but keeps to herself. Because what if people think it's ridiculous with the promotion she could apply for but doesn't, because surely someone else is more qualified. With the message to someone she likes that stayed in the draft so long, the window eventually closed. Emma's life works. From the outside, it even looks good. But there's a cost no one sees, a cost paid in missed opportunities, connections that never happened, versions of herself that stayed in draft form because the voice said they weren't ready yet. And the real question here is not, how can Emma be more confident? The real question is this: where does that voice come from? When did it begin? And what is it actually trying to protect? Before we name the shadow, I want you to notice the warning signs, because chronic self-doubt doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up quietly, in small signals. Signals most people normalize until the pattern runs so deep it just feels like who you are. The first warning sign is identity procrastination. You're not postponing tasks, you're postponing yourself. It's not the spreadsheet you keep delaying, it's the important conversation you never start, the decision you never make, the personal project that stays parked in the same place for months, waiting for the moment when you'll finally feel ready. Pay attention to that word, ready. Self-doubt quietly redefines ready as a state that never arrives. There's always one more thing to learn, one more skill to develop, one more improved version of you that needs to exist before you're allowed to act. Have you ever delayed something not because you didn't know how to do it, but because you were afraid to find out you might not be good enough at it? That's the first alarm. And it doesn't just live in your thoughts, it shows up in the body. A heaviness in your chest when you think about the project. A strange kind of fatigue that appears exactly when it's time to work on something that actually matters. The second warning sign is automatic negative filtering. It works like this. 10 people tell you your work is good. 1 person criticizes something. Guess which voice your mind replays at the end of the day? Self-doubt has a very specific filter. Anything that confirms you're not enough passes straight through. Anything that contradicts that story gets minimized or dismissed. Praise becomes politeness, criticism becomes truth, success becomes luck, failure becomes proof. Emma did this perfectly in the story you just heard. The meeting was an objective success, and still, what stayed in her body wasn't the feeling of confirmed competence, it was relief. Relief from surviving, because the filter of self-doubt doesn't process "you did well" as evidence that you're capable. It processes it as "you got away with it this time," and that is exhausting, literally exhausting. Research shows that anxious anticipation and mental rumination activate the same neural circuits as real physical threats. To your brain, the difference between a lion in the savannah and a corporate presentation can become surprisingly small when chronic self-doubt is involved. The third warning sign is comparison as punishment. There's a healthy kind of comparison. You look at someone you admire and feel inspired, but there's another kind, punitive comparison. That's when you look at someone and instantly use what you see as evidence that something is wrong with you. She's my age and already achieved that. What's wrong with me? He speaks with so much confidence. I'll never be like that. Punitive comparison is not looking for inspiration. It's looking for proof for a verdict that was already decided. You're not enough. Can you recognize these signals in yourself? Not in a judgmental way, just observing. Because these three patterns, identity procrastination, negative filtering, and punitive comparison, they're symptoms. And symptoms always point to something deeper. They point to the shadow. But before we name that shadow, I want you to feel the weight of what these patterns cost, not in theory, in reality. Think about one opportunity you didn't take in the last 12 months. Just one. Something the voice convinced you weren't ready for. Feel the weight of that moment. Not to punish yourself, but to see clearly that the cost of avoiding this is real, measurable. It's the life that could have happened, but didn't, because a shadow had more authority over your choices than you did. That cost is the most important alarm of all. And now, it's time to name what's creating it. The shadow has a name, and its name is this. The child who learned that being seen is dangerous. Let me explain. At some point in your life, most likely when you were a child or a teenager, you showed yourself. Maybe it was an idea you shared with real excitement, maybe something you created, an opinion you expressed with confidence, a version of you that was alive, curious, present, and something happened. Not necessarily something dramatic. Sometimes it was small, but it cut deeper than anyone realized. Maybe the adult in the room didn't have time. Stop talking about that. You don't really understand it anyway. Maybe people laughed, not cruelly, not on purpose, but they laughed at something that felt serious to you. Maybe you raised your hand in class, confident you had the answer, and the teacher said, in a tone that sounded neutral but didn't feel neutral, "Interesting, but that's not quite right." Maybe you showed something you made with pride, and the response you got was silence. Let's step into a moment. Not Emma as an adult, Emma at 9 years old. It's a Thursday afternoon. She's sitting at the dining table with a drawing she made at school, a rocket ship. She spent the whole afternoon on it, the way children do when they're completely absorbed. The rocket has detailed windows. The flames are colored in 3 different shades of orange. There's a tiny astronaut visible through one of the windows. Emma is proud, genuinely proud. Her mom walks in. She looks tired. It's been a long day at work. Emma lifts the drawing. "Mom, look what I made." Her mom glances at it. 2 seconds. What is it?" "It's a rocket, Mom. Look, the astronaut is right here." Her mom tilts her head slightly. "Okay, nice." And she walks into the kitchen. 2 seconds of attention. "Okay, nice." And she's gone. Emma stays there holding the drawing. The pride doesn't disappear all at once. It slowly evaporates, like water on a hot afternoon, and something begins to form inside her, not in words. She's 9 years old. 9-year-olds don't build thoughts like that yet. It forms as a feeling. The feeling says, what you make isn't interesting enough to deserve attention. Try harder. Or maybe, don't try at all. That way you won't have to feel this again. No one in that moment was trying to hurt her. Her mom was tired. It was a Thursday. She wasn't trying to damage her daughter's confidence. But a 9-year-old brain doesn't process context. It processes meaning. And the meaning that stayed was simple. Showing what you made risks disappointment. Being seen is dangerous. So over the years that followed, Emma's mind built a strategy, a form of protection, a kind of armor. If you never show yourself completely, you can't be completely rejected. If you present a slightly smaller version of yourself to the world, then when rejection comes, it won't hurt as much. If you doubt yourself before anyone else can doubt you, you control the story. You're the first one to say you're not enough, and that way, no one else has to say it. It's a brilliant strategy. It was created by a smart mind, trying to protect itself in a world that once felt unpredictable, but it carries a fatal flaw. It was designed by a 9-year-old to protect a 9-year-old, and Emma is not 9 anymore. The child who learned that being seen is dangerous still lives inside her. She's still running the alarm system. She still classifies presenting my work in a meeting as a survival threat. She still whispers, "Wait, we're not ready yet." Every time Emma is about to show herself, she isn't your enemy, she was your protector, but she's using a map of a world that no longer exists, protecting you from dangers that are no longer there, using strategies that made sense for a child, but come with a heavy cost for an adult. The shadow has a name, and once something has a name, it begins to lose its power. The name of your shadow is protection that slowly turned into a prison. And now that you can see it, now that you can tell the difference between its voice and your own, we can finally begin the real work. What I just described to you, Carl Jung would have called it a complex. Carl Jung, a psychological complex isn't madness, it's a pattern, an emotional structure built around a core experience, usually from childhood, that begins to operate almost on its own inside the psyche. It develops its own logic, its own voice, its own triggers. The archetype that lives underneath chronic self-doubt is what I call the adult who waits for permission. This archetype shows up in highly functional people, people like Emma, people who appear capable, reliable, even impressive from the outside, but who, internally, are still waiting for a signal that they're finally good enough to act with full authority in their own lives. They're waiting for permission. Permission from who? From the authority they absorbed long ago, the mother who barely looked at the drawing, the teacher who said, "Interesting, but that's not quite right," the group of teenagers who laughed when you said something you meant sincerely. The adult who waits for permission has some very recognizable traits. They are incredibly good at helping other people make decisions, but freeze when it comes to their own. They can defend a colleague's idea beautifully in a meeting, but rarely defend their own idea with the same certainty. They overanalyze everything to eliminate any possible margin of error, because a margin of error means the possibility of being seen as insufficient. Picture a moment like this. Your team is discussing a problem, you have an idea, and you feel deep down that it's a good one. But while everyone else is talking, you keep refining it in your head, turning it over, checking every angle, making sure there's no flaw, making sure it's airtight. And by the time you finally open your mouth, someone else has already suggested something very similar. The group starts nodding, the conversation moves forward, and you sit there thinking, "I could have said that," but you didn't, because the adult who waits for permission needed one more round of internal validation before it was safe to speak. Now imagine another scene. Your boss gives you positive feedback about a project, something simple. "Great work on this, Emma. You handled it really well." What does the adult who waits for permission do with that information? It accepts it for about 30 seconds. Maybe you feel a small warmth in your chest, and then the mind immediately starts searching for the exception. But he didn't mention the confusing part of the report. He's probably just being polite. Let's see what happens on the next project. The praise never lands. It passes through a filter of automatic disqualification, because this archetype was never built to hold evidence of sufficiency. It was built for vigilance, not for rest. Recognizing this archetype in yourself is not something to feel ashamed of. It's something that brings clarity, because once you can see it, you can begin to notice the difference between your voice and its voice. And that distinction, small as it may seem, is where every real change begins. Look at this carefully, because this is the most sophisticated trap of self-doubt, and it's the reason most people who try to work through this alone end up right back where they started. The trap is called this: trying to build confidence before you act. The logic seems obvious. First, I feel confident, then I act. It sounds reasonable. It sounds safe. It feels like the correct order of things, and it's completely wrong. Confidence is not a requirement for action. Confidence is a side effect of action. It's something that forms afterward, through accumulated evidence that you were capable. And that evidence only exists if you acted before you felt ready. Waiting to feel confident before acting is like waiting to get in shape before going to the gym. The cause and effect are reversed, and the trap becomes even more sophisticated because self-doubt often disguises itself as self-care. It says things like, "Now isn't the right time. You need to prepare a little more. When you have more experience, then you can do it." That language sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It even sounds wise. But look closely. It always points toward a vague future where the conditions will finally be right. And that future never arrives, because every time you get close to the conditions you thought you needed, the voice quietly redefines them. Emma waited to feel confident before presenting. But every time she prepared more, the voice simply found a new angle where she might still be exposed. It wasn't a lack of preparation, it was the trap at work. The way out of that trap is not brutal. It's not, "Just do it, even if you're terrified." It's more subtle than that. It's learning to act with the doubt present. Not despite the doubt, with it. You recognize the voice. You name what's happening. You notice the fear, the hesitation, the discomfort, and then you move your body anyway. Not ignoring the discomfort, moving through it consciously. And to do that, you need something very specific, not motivation. Training. This is the training. 30 days, 4 weeks, each week with a specific focus. This isn't theory, it's practice. It's what happens the morning after you close this video and open your eyes. Week 1. Observe without judging. Days 1 to 7. The goal of the first week is not to change anything, just to observe. That sounds simple. But it's harder than it looks, because the same mind that doubts itself also doubts its own observations. It will try to turn observation into judgment. Your job this week is to resist that. Daily practice. The voice journal. Every morning, right after you wake up, before checking your phone, before coffee, sit down with a notebook, not digital, paper and pen. 5 minutes. Write the answers to 3 questions. First question. What did the voice of doubt say yesterday that made me hesitate? Think about the previous day. Find one specific moment. It can be small. The time you didn't speak in a meeting. The email you rewrote 5 times. The moment you checked someone else's work hoping to find something that made yours look less exposed. Second question. What did it feel like in my body? Where did the doubt show up? Chest, throat, stomach? Just describe it. No interpretation. A tight feeling in my stomach when I opened the email. Tension in my shoulders right before speaking. Your body registers self-doubt before your conscious mind understands it. Learning to read those signals is a fundamental skill. Third question. What part of me was trying to protect me? Not, why am I such a coward? But, what was the hesitation trying to protect me from? Embarrassment? Rejection? Disappointment? Looking inadequate? This question invites compassion, not judgment. Throughout the day, whenever you notice the voice of doubt, don't try to silence it, just notice it. Oh, there it is. Like noticing rain outside the window. You don't need to run outside and shut every door. Observation without judgment creates distance, and distance is where freedom begins. On the 7th day, read what you wrote during the week. Not to analyze deeply, just to see the pattern from above. What does the voice fear most? Usually 1 or 2 themes start repeating. Write those down, you'll need them later. Why this works? Neuroscience calls this affect labeling, the act of naming an emotion while it's happening. Research from University of California, Los Angeles has shown that simply naming a feeling reduces activity in the brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat responses. When Emma thinks, "I'm afraid I'll look incompetent," her threat response decreases compared to when she just feels the fear without naming it. Naming doesn't erase the emotion, but it regulates it, and regulation is what makes action possible. Touches Week 2, interrupt the pattern, days 8 to 14. If Week 1 teaches you to observe, Week 2 teaches you to create space between the trigger and the automatic response. That space is where choice lives. Daily practice. The 3-second protocol. Whenever you notice the voice of doubt about to dictate your behavior, inhale for 3 seconds, exhale for 6 seconds, short inhale, long exhale. This pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the natural braking system for your internal alarm. This isn't metaphor, it's physiology. While you breathe, ask yourself, is this a fact or an interpretation? Emma believed the client would realize she was less competent than she appeared. Is that a fact? No. It's an interpretation. An interpretation created by a 9-year-old pattern that once learned being seen was dangerous. Udraz practice, the minimum viable action. Every day this week you take one small action. You would normally delay because of self-doubt. The size doesn't matter. The structure does. Feel the doubt. Breathe. Act anyway. Examples: send the email without reviewing it a 5th time. Share your opinion in a meeting the first time the opening appears. Send the text message without rereading it 3 times. Submit the work before it feels perfect. Speak first in a conversation where you normally wait. These actions look small. That's exactly why they work. Confidence grows from evidence. Each moment of "I acted even with doubt and nothing collapsed" slowly recalibrates your brain's threat detection system. You are, quite literally, rewiring the neurology of fear. After each action, write one line. Did it? How do I feel? No analysis, just the record. At the end of the week, the accumulation of those small entries will tell a story. And week 3, expand the exposure zone, days 15 to 21. In the first 2 weeks you observed and interrupted the pattern. Now you begin to expand, gradually, intentionally. The exposure map. Open your notebook. Draw a scale from 1 to 10. At Baumun, write situations that create very mild self-doubt, maybe posting a public comment online. At by 10, write the situation that feels most vulnerable. Maybe giving a large presentation, publishing a personal project, or having a difficult conversation. Now look at where you usually operate. If you normally act between levels 1 and 3 and avoid everything above, your task this week is one action at level 4. Just one, but a real one. The logic is the same as gradual exposure therapy used to treat phobias. You don't throw someone with a spider phobia into a room full of spiders. You start with a picture, then a plastic spider, then a real spider in a sealed container. Each successful step recalibrates the threat system. Chronic self-doubt is essentially a fear of judgment combined with a fear of personal inadequacy. The treatment follows the same logic. The fair witness practice. Every day this week, write down 3 pieces of evidence of your competence or value from the previous day. Not vague, concrete, not "I was helpful." Nay, but when John got stuck with the client issue, I proposed the alternative solution he ended up using. Not "I'm a good person," but "I spent 20 minutes helping Anna even though I was busy." This isn't narcissism, it's fairness. A fair witness applies the same standard of evidence to both strengths and weaknesses. Self-doubt is an unfair witness. It demands strict proof for failure and dismisses proof of competence. This practice retrains your internal court of judgment. Barashas Week 4. Consolidate the new identity, days 22 to 30. The final week is about integration. You observed, you interrupted, you expanded. Now you begin building a new narrative about who you are. The identity statement. Every morning write this sentence and complete it. I am someone who... But the statement must describe real behavior, not ideals. Not, I am someone who is very confident. Instead, I am someone who acts even with doubt. Not, I am someone who never hesitates. Instead, I am someone who hesitates and still moves. This distinction matters. Identity based on real behavior is stable. Identity based on ideals collapses the moment you fall short. You are not trying to eliminate doubt. You are redefining your relationship to it. From doubt stops me to doubt is present and I move anyway. The letter to the child. On day 28, set aside 30 minutes. Find a quiet place. Write a letter to the version of you who was the age when the voice of doubt first took root. Maybe 8 years old, maybe 12, maybe 15. Write to that child with the voice of the adult you are today. Not to fix the past. The past doesn't change. But to complete an emotional circuit that never closed. Say what needed to be said. Offer the recognition that never arrived from outside, but that can now come from within. This practice comes from modern parenting work and from the tradition of active imagination developed in analytical psychology. Many people who do it describe the result the same way. Something loosened, not a miracle cure, but an integration. The part of Emma who once believed being seen was dangerous finally receives a new message. She can rest. The adult Emma knows how to take care of her now. Her protection was valuable, but it is no longer necessary. During the final 2 days, read everything you wrote over the 30 days. Not to analyze, just to see who was there on day 1 and who is here on day 30. They're not different people, but they are different perspectives, and sometimes perspective changes everything. 3 lines on a piece of paper, that's all. I want you to think of someone you admire because of the confidence they show. It could be someone you know. It could be a public figure. It could even be a fictional character. Picture that person. Do you have them in mind? Now ask yourself something honestly. Do you think that person never has doubts? Do you think they wake up every morning with unshakable certainty about who they are, that the voice that visits you never visits them? Of course it does. The difference between people who seem confident and people who feel paralyzed by doubt is not the absence of doubt. It's what they do with it. It's the relationship they've built with their own uncertainty. The people we call brave are not the ones who feel no fear. They're the ones who felt the fear and walked anyway. Brené Brown spent years studying what she calls wholehearted people. People who live fully. What she discovered was interesting. The difference wasn't that these people had less vulnerability or less doubt. The difference was their willingness to show up with vulnerability still present, to act in the middle of uncertainty, without waiting for uncertainty to disappear first. So here's the exercise, the simplest one in this entire video. Take a piece of paper, not later, now, and write this. Today, I will, then finish the sentence with one small thing you normally delay because of self-doubt. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real, concrete, and it has to happen today. Because every 30-day journey begins the same way, with a first step. And the first step doesn't require confidence. It requires a decision. If you made it this far, you've already done something most people don't do. You stayed. You stayed with the discomfort of recognizing a pattern. You stayed with Emma's story, because somewhere along the way it was also a little bit your story. You stayed through the naming of the shadow, the archetype, the trap, the training. That alone is an act of courage. A small one maybe, but a real one. The shadow underneath chronic self-doubt doesn't disappear overnight. It was built over years, and it usually changes over months, but transformation begins exactly like this, exactly with what you just did. You saw it, you named it, and the shadow has a name. And when something has a name, it begins to lose its power. You don't have to wait until you feel ready. You will never feel completely ready. No one ever does. That's not failure, that's human. It's the shared condition of anyone who has ever done something that mattered. So act with what you have, from where you are, with the doubt present, but not in control. If something in this video touched something real in you, share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Sometimes the greatest act of confidence you can offer someone is simply saying, I saw this and I thought of you. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already here. And in the comments, tell me, what was the most important thing you're taking with you from this video? I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, act. With doubt or without it, just act.